Greetings, shalom, Jacob.
Hi.
Um, we are continuing with this series of belief briefs where we're talking with friends about the different religious traditions and experience that our friends have, and so um, uh, the idea is just asking you a few questions about your.
Okay.
So just knowing you, we talked about this before about the multiple affiliations that you have, and so there's an interest in hearing about all of that. So, um, is there anything you want to ask before we get into it, or are we ready to roll?
No, no, I am not now, nor I ever been. Oh, never mind. That was another
All right,
question period. Okay, go ahead.
all right. Okay. So here we go. First
Uh-huh.
question. What is your religion?
Oh, yeah. See, I wouldn't claim to have a religion but I'm affiliated, I suppose, or I'm connected to. Somebody asked me, "What are you?" I say, "I'm a Jewish person, and
Okay.
I'm an observant Jew. I'm a trans-denominational Jew."
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Okay.
I also, well, I mean, I'm essentially connected to the one being, which means how I've identified is my connection with Sufism, which is, by the way, not a religion.
Okay.
Sufism is not a religion.
Sure.
So, I mean, I use that as part of my spiritual life. I've been around for 43, 44, 40, something like that years with that spiritual path.
Hmm.
And they're the ones that got me reconnected on a deeper level with Judaism. And I have been in Christian monasteries, lived for up to 3 weeks. I was a Zen monk for about a year, and I still feel connected to Buddhism. So it's not just something that I philosophically connect up with. I feel connected on an experiential level with many different religions. There's not a religion really that I don't think has some of the truth. Somebody could say, is Judaism better? I don't know. I don't think so. It's the same. It's just I happen to like the vocabulary, and I feel comfortable with the conveyance and my tradition and my culture. But I like it specifically, but I don't feel in any way that it's superior to anything
Hmm.
that's out there.
Nice. Nice. All right. Thank you.
Do I get extra points for that answer? Or
You get a gold
let's go
star.
on to some other thing where prizes will be
You're
available.
you're 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 you're, uh, you're baiting me, so I'm gonna resist. I already
All
slipped
right.
up a little bit with the gold star thing, but anyways, all right. That was yeah. Actually, that's a very poor statement in this context. Anyways, um, I I see the difference for that. Anyway, so continuing on. Second question. When does your religion begin? And I'm using the word religion. It can
All
be
right.
spirituality, tradition. However, it's a specific word, but I'm communicating it in a general manner. So however you find it applicable, you can use whatever words you find appropriate for yourself. But when does
It's an odd question, Peter.
I know and I
I
know,
mean, I never thought when does it begin?
yeah.
I mean, when does it end? I mean, I guess when you're alive and when you're dead. I guess when you decide that you can always say no to a religion. I mean, you're allowed to do that
Yeah.
if you want to. I have not done that too much, although some religion probably needs to be a lot of people saying no because the structure is in the way many times of people having the intention of the purpose of what the religion's trying to evoke from a person.
Hmm.
And sometimes the traditions help and sometimes they don't. In our day and age, I think the problem is that people are rejecting these things because they're not helping. The clergy and the dogma are interfering with people's directly connecting up. And so there's a disappointment for myself. I like to be in the religion and then transcend it, but I just happen to like it. So when does it begin? I just don't know the answer to that thing. I mean, I have breath, so I have it, but I guess I've always been interested in it. I don't know when it begins, really. I don't know.
Okay.
It's a trick question. Is that a trick question?
It's actually it's you the way that you receive it and convey it is
Okay.
increasingly existential, and I
Oh,
appreciate
okay.
that, and that's very
Okay.
valid and relevant. The thinking behind the question is kind of like in a very mundane kind of kind of pigeonholing kind of context of just like when did the teachings begin, or when is the when is like a tangible point in history that
Oh, I see. Oh.
the practice of the religion begins. But like I say, your response is very valid, because the experience of religion itself is a process of renewing.
Yeah, but I've heard I've read things historically, but it's not experiential for me, so it's less important.
Okay.
For me, it's just not. It's interesting to study it, but I don't find it that vital.
Sure. Okay. Well, let's keep it at that and continue on to the next question, and perhaps at the end we may have opportunity for additional discussion or just riffing.
Okay.
So the third question is, who is the founder of your religion?
Huh, that's an interesting thing too, because
these are very finite, somewhat inapplicable.
I think the prophets and these different people like Moses, they didn't found a religion. I mean, I don't think many of them actually decided, except maybe Moses wanted to organize a group. But I think Jesus and everybody, they just who I connect up with, these teachings, I think they've always been. I just think at different times in history, the divine being needs to be shaped in a certain way so it's culturally relevant to people, and the language that can be expressed. For myself, I don't think there's ever been a time. I mean, Muhammad, the prophet, had something very important to say, and it's still relevant. I mean, the inspiration of that. But for myself, I think I would be curious what things were like 60,000 years ago. I mean, I would like to think, like, very long ago, when did something? There must have been a jump in human origins, but most religions that we're studying or involved with is 4 to 6,000 years at the latest. But I don't know. If you think later, there must have been some spiritual life, took on a little bit different clothing, or what the nature of the epic was, the period. So let's get back to the question. For me, when did Judaism start? I guess there was a time when people had been around, and then they named it after they'd already been around for about 800 years or something. I guess, and they sort of organized the teachings, the oral teachings, and put it into writing. But again, that's important as a sociological thing, and I suppose if somebody asked me, I need to answer them. But it doesn't really affect me much in my life. But when did it begin? What did you say? Who started it?
Well, who is the founder?
Who was the founder?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're Jewish, you have to say something like Moses, I guess. Abraham. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, in the Sufis, we talk about Abraham and the Egyptian mysteries and different things, but there are other people that say Sufism's been around for thousands, way pre that. I mean, there's never been a time when it's not been around.
Sure.
It's just that, the Desert Fathers and different people came out of the desert, and it's identified as Sufism. But I've read Murat Yagin and stuff about other things in the Caucasus, that these mystery traditions have lasted, are very ancient. I mean, we don't even have a recorded history, but I could see that. But I don't have anything concrete about that. But I've read different things. A lot of Sufis say, well, it started with Muhammad. I never argue about it with anybody. I really don't know. I know what my own teacher, Husband of the Khan, says, but on various occasions he's brought it up. I've already mentioned that. Okay. That's it.
Thank you. So continuing on to the next challenging question. Who or what is the highest authority in your religion?
There's an accountant in Seattle who a lot of people don't know. He's one of the hidden.
Right. We got you.
No, I don't know. I don't. There are these traditions that there's 36, and it's spread out. I mean, Catholics have the Pope. We have a chief rabbi, but Judaism seems to have a spread out an agreement that somehow by the higher authorities. And certainly I respect the people who are the rabbis or the different sages of our time. And I know some of the traditions, the authority See, that the questions you're asking, that setup is not really it's not attuned. People are not really looking at, well, Bubba said it, so people who are immature spiritually need to know those questions. I'm not saying I'm any better than anybody, but I don't think of, excuse me, you go ahead, please.
That's where it's coming from, Jacob. I mean, I recognize these questions, and a number of friends mentioned this as well. How the questions are less accurate or
No, you're doing a good job. I just worry that you're going to blackmail me at some time. What?
It's all benevolent intentions. So, but the idea is structuring these questions, particularly for those who are less familiar with just religion and particularly other religions. And so there's kind of like that pigeonholing and different types of binaries and constructs that are less relevant in many spiritual experiences. But for those who are accustomed to that type of mindset and perspective, that's
well, it just depends on history. I mean, I've been just studying a little bit of Hildegard of Bingen, and she's got to be in the 800s or 1000, a Catholic woman who completely restructured a lot of Western spirituality. A lot of people are becoming familiar with her, and she's a woman. And if you see the movies about her or read the books, this woman completely revolutionized things, and she did these answers to these questions. She just took it on what her visions did, and had some authenticity that is still relevant today. So ultimately, religion, I think, is somewhat of, I don't think we should give it away. I think it's important to have it, and I certainly depend on it. But I think it's not a crutch, but it's a guideline so that we won't go too far out of start experimenting with our own our own practices and things, which is important. I'm not kidding you or something, because I've heard some people I know are doing that. But essentially, some people are not as creative, and they're very unsure. It's a very hard world out there. And a lot of people need to have a guardrail. Now, I have a hard time breathing and walking sometimes. In my place where I live, there is actually a guardrail around the entire facility. I don't even need to use my cane when I'm walking around, because I can just hold the guardrail. Okay. But I want to get to the point where I'm not using that anymore. But essentially, religion is simply there to remind people of things. And believe me, the highest level of humanity needs that reminder, because we get very distracted, and I'm one of them. Yeah. I don't mind. I actually like religion, but I mean, I have to say, I think some really great people are able to get by without it, and I wouldn't say that it's not authentic. But I would say it would be a large mistake. I think there would be massive chaos on the planet without it. And for myself, I like it, but I also like the ability of the freedom. I feel religion's there to set us free, not imprison us. So I like to look at it as an emancipation, liberation aid. I don't like to look at it as well, you got to do the rules. Do those rules or else you'll die. You're a sinner. Yeah. That's not the way I look at it. So. Yeah. So that's in a way, I don't know if I'm getting maybe away from the answer.
Well, you speak about religion, the structure, the guide, the guide rail, or to provide some, and that's in response to the consideration of authority.
But I don't think people should give it up. I think it could really be a major. If some great Sufis, I used to think they should just stop it. It's a nonsense. Even though I've always respected religions, and then there's some great mystics that said that would be truly people who are on the edge need it. And I mean, it's keeping the world in check. I mean, murderers and hoodlums, crazy people. And I don't want to be, saying that people who are in religion are that level, because some of the highest people on the planet are. But if they were to dismiss religion, I don't know what kind of hell would be unleashed on the planet. There would be people that would say, okay, I can do whatever I want. And there's that level, and then there's a level of enhanced life and enlightenment. And even the highest mystics, Ibn Arabi, Jalaluddin Rumi, in the Islamic and Sufi worlds, some of the great Christians, they didn't abandon religion or their own religion, even though they even might have gotten kicked out or shunned from their religion. They went on and had that guidelines. And so somebody that would say do away with religion, I would not be in favor of that.
I hear you.
I mean, for myself, I mean, I'm not, I'm not an authority of anything. I'm just a student, but that's how I feel about it.
Okay. So you speak about temporal authority and structure. I'm interested in knowing if you would articulate or elaborate on your belief of like a transcendent or existential authority, and how that is how that is understood within your spirituality or religion.
I'm tempted to abstain from answering that, but I won't,
Right.
because you're answering it and it's a legitimate question.
Okay.
So let's repeat it again.
Yeah.
What is my
basically
belief? See, what you said. What is my belief in a transcendental authority?
I mean, is there such?
I'll answer it. Is that what the question is?
Essentially, yeah.
All right. Well, first of all, belief structures are not so important to me at all.
Mm.
I want to see what somebody does. So somebody can go, are you a believer, or do you believe? And once I get, I mean, I'm not going to really get into that, because believing is quite it's a cop-out. It's not, somebody learned it in kindergarten, they just kept on having it. It's not a functional, I'm not saying belief is not helpful, because God knows it is, but it's not what the backbone of where I'm headed. I'm looking at developing, patterns of practice or behavior that are different than a belief. Well, the belief's definitely in there. It helps. It's simply a helper and a transcendental authority. I think a lot of people, this is the type of conversation a lot of people have, like in a waiting room of a medical, they've been to church and they're talking, and this is the way they're used to thinking. Yeah. And I don't like to get authentic with people, because it can be stunning and they can be shocked. But it's like, my teacher said, your belief about who you think God is nothing related to God at all.
Hmm.
The actual being of God is, you haven't even imagined it, okay? Yeah. It's and that is a shock. If you really get into the substance of it, that's a difficult subject to admit to yourself. Did you mean all this prayer and things where I talk about God has nothing to do with God? Not the substance of God, not the reality of God. I mean, they said that Moses' face was so awesome and content that you would lose your identity, or you couldn't live and see Moses' eyes. Well, what they were talking about is you would lose your own identity, because you would be merged with a blazing enlightenment being. Hmm. If anybody's ever been close to a person of that nature, it is transformative. Hmm. I mean, I have been. There's a Krishnamurti. I saw him once, and I didn't know who it was. I saw him, an image of a guy coming out of a car in New York. I stood up immediately and bowed to the guy, and I said, that's Krishnamurti. And when you see a great teacher, or you look into their face, and I have maybe some unknown people, it is transformative. And these people, what is it about them that stands out? And it's like they're not tied to an own identity, like their religion, their belief. That's just God, okay? Mm-hmm. And that's what the great beings have been. Like Levi Yitzhak of Berditchev from the Hasidic tradition, and they do songs and prayers that they've made up like that. And when you read the liturgy at some level, that's what it's talking about. Is just non-identity with a certain transcendental. But the Sufis put it a different way. And that is, if you believe in a transcendental authority, that's not really the goal only. It is a goal, but what the goal is to have a double-tracked focus, which is the infinite and the finite. In other words, the immanent God and the transcendent God at the same time. Because both those realities, God is everywhere. Where we sit is God, everything. And then beyond that, everything even beyond the imagination is also God. That's the transcendental. So the Sufis, differently than let's say a Hindu trajectory, I'm sure Buddhism has some very sophisticated philosophies about it. They don't have God at all in there, but the immanent reality is almost as important, or maybe as important, as the transcendental. It's both are issues, both are God. So that's how I would answer that question, I suppose.
That's fantastic.
That's okay?
Fantastic. So let's move on to the next one. Okay. Changing gears a little bit, perhaps literally. What are significant rituals or observances within your religion or spirituality?
sleep is a big one. Napping,
Well,
eating. I mean, but
that's not
listen,
a
that
joke.
keeps me alive. Anything that keeps me alive is good.
Yeah.
But in terms of rituals, well, you have a daily prayer and a daily practice, and you have. Last night I was leading something at a Catholic institution in their faith program that I mentioned,
Right.
and I was in charge of it. And we do chanting, but I also introduced a few practices, and one of them was a light practice. And I went, why the heck am I not doing more practices that involve with light? Extremely powerful. And there was some people there, and I shared them, and they liked them, and they said they got something from it. I didn't really have enough time to discuss it completely with them, but for myself, I don't do as regular a practice as I'd like, and I'm getting ready to go into a new gear and go back. I've been struggling with my health so much that it's just not fair to have a regular practice because you're just happy to get up. And now I'm at a point where I'm created a little prayer space in my house, and I'm going to move. My goal is to move to an every day, the same time, a certain amount of prayer and study, which I try to do anyway, but it's not as regular. It really helps if it's every day. So I have to admit, and it does. There is a significant difference in your awareness if you're really doing a practice and watching your breath as much as you can during the day, as opposed to just sort of being random, because you're not as in control. You haven't honed your own attention span to be more connected. I mean, we wander a lot, and if you're doing a practice, you come back to a center point easier, in my experience. So I don't know. We have the Shabbat and the ritual. The cycle. I try to follow.
Yeah.
And I have Shabbat and affiliations that I do pray on a weekly basis, and I study with a prayer partner, the Torah. We try to do it weekly, and then which that's funny to you, sir?
Wow.
No. And I try to do things. This is part of my spiritual practice.
Yeah.
Part of my spiritual practice is trying to. It's not ritualized, but it's maybe listening a little bit more, personal habits, personal things that maybe have gotten not more as I'd like, and just try to gradually hone them in a little bit, listen more, speak less, not always tell jokes, things like that. But, I'm not going to change myself, but I want to kind of hone it. I want to take the driving wheel and make sure I'm managing things better. That's part of my practice. The ritualized, I kind of really like the rituals. I like Arthur Waskow, who's and some of these other people who are creators of in the rabbinate of liturgy. I like Jim Wallace from the Christian tradition, who really, he's a Baptist, but he takes the Christian tradition and really puts a progressive spin on progressivism or social activism or daily life. He has a Sojourners magazine that I enjoy, but there's amazing number of people out there. I mean, there's people dying off and new people are taking their places, and there's younger people coming around. So I don't know if that's really what you wanted to hear, but that's kind of how.
That's helpful. So going on to question.
Wait, go ahead. Can you hear me? Go ahead.
Yeah, I can hear you. So what does your religion or spirituality teach about outsiders?
Shun them. I mean, we definitely, that sort of pisses me off, is shunning. I don't understand. I think if you were in the desert and if you were in a very dangerous population period of history, you would have to have some modality of inner and outer, but the world is so interconnected. I don't see how you can have an outsider. It's really silly. I've just listened to some comedy routines this morning of Lewis Black and Carlin, and they're kind of angry men, but some of the stuff's kind of funny. The idea of going outside the mainstream of ideas, I just think it's very limited thinking. I know that there are some great beings, like there was one guy who was at the same time, I forget he was the head rabbi of the time, at the time that the Hasidim were starting. And this guy shunned and excommunicated the Baal Shem Tov, probably one of the top 5 or 10 Jews in the last 300 or 400 years. How does that happen? I don't. Boruch Spinoza was ostracized and excommunicated. These are the great contributors into the planet he was Jewish, it happened to be. And they just didn't like him. They didn't like his thoughts. Galileo was ostracized by the Pope. And then, people takes them about 400 years to realize what a foolish thing they've done. In the meantime, let's get back to the question again, please.
Outside.
What was the question? Yeah, I mean, it's easy to, you start talking with Orthodox people about the outsiders, and Jehovah's Witnesses have a very strong shunning program. I guess you need, if you're really focused on your organization, and I know what that's about. I'm not against organizations. You have to have some vessel to carry a population, and there are certain things. I think that's a lesson. Fear is a less powerful thing than love. It's easy to say. It's very hard to keep people organized, but I don't know the idea of the outsider. I know in Judaism we have, you shall love the stranger as yourself. So I think it's very odd that any Jewish person would took their religion halfway seriously would have some outsider and really not want the refugees. It is a challenge to be with somebody very different from you. And it's one of the challenges. I think it's probably the primary challenge of the population of the earth at the present time, is to simply be respectful to people that, we have to live with each other.
Right.
And at least don't kill them, but learn to, not necessarily, I mean, the Christian would say we need to love them. I would say just be respectful. That would be enough.
Sure.
If somebody, you can live with something different. I live with people very different from me. And that's an interesting lesson. I think it's just good to look at it. But it's very important. For myself, I don't know how the religion, I don't think we have an authority that can ostracize you. I mean, I go in some pretty observant or traditional sources, and if they ever found out my incomplete belief system, they may want to ostracize me, I suppose. But, I don't spread it around, but I'm not going to lie. If they ask me questions, I'll tell them how I think. And I'm not afraid of losing it. I would be disappointed to lose that connection with very traditional sources. And I have enough faith that wouldn't happen, but
yeah,
I don't know. I don't know. I don't see how people in our day and age where everything is so closely connected, how you can even have an outsider.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, unless you're living somewhere on the very isolated place, like an island somewhere. But even then, I just don't see how it could be. It's not I think you're going to see less of that, or maybe more. I can't even imagine what it's. The world's changing so much. I don't see how you can have an outsider. It doesn't exist. But it does exist because that's I see the news and people consider it. So I guess with that, with these refugees, it's a shame that the world hasn't resolved that, but it looks like it's a challenge right now. So I don't have an answer really for it. I just know how I feel about it myself.
Well, you provide a rather multifaceted response.
Well, wait, I got something else to say.
Okay.
Which is a microcosm of that question is what I think it's almost more important or as important is what do you do with the outsider that's outside of your own belief of who you are? And that itself is an important thing. You go, oh, no, I don't make mistakes. I don't do that. I'm not that type of a person. And how someone resolves that can be very important into how a person evolves and develops. Because if you're not willing to accept your entire shadow self and other things, so in other words, there's a reflection of how you feel about yourself and how you project onto the universe. So I think if a person's thinking, I would never do that. They're kind of lying to themselves or whatever, not being truthful. And so that's important how a person does, because it will reflect a group or their own belief on how to handle the outsider is how you handle the outsider, quote unquote, of your own being. Okay. I think that might be an interesting, relevant thing there.
Very appropriate.
Yay, I'm appropriate. I love to hear that. It's like a sticker for me. Thank you.
Right. So here's the concluding question. What are gems in your religion or spirituality that you treasure?
I like the free gifts during the holidays that the Jewish Federation gives me, and credit to Dave's that they do. But the real gems are, I think, when somebody recognizes you and you have communion and you get a chance to do a meditation or write or share in a dialogue mode or do some type of meditation with a group or doing a project in a group level and community. I like that. But that could, in my community, well, I'm quite a number of communities. I do like working in conjunction with people on a common goal. And I like being respected. I'm an idea person, but I don't have the energy to complete the task myself, which is good because that's not our time period. I enjoy working on a task with other people. I don't need to dominate the proceedings. In fact, it's not good because, it's not necessary, and it certainly would make it less. I don't always have the skills needed to complete an entire project. That's why it's good we have different people to do that, not just from an energy point of view, but different points of view, different lenses. I like, what is the question again? I like to come back to this. I don't want to get
religion or spirituality that you.
Oh, yeah, right. Well, like I said, I don't think of religion as a prison, although you do need to start with the ability to focus and develop some type of habit patterns that are limiting. But in general, I see religion, the parts that I like, especially my spiritual things, is to develop liberation points, that really going on retreat and limiting those retreats, and I don't do many these days, I want to do one soon, gives you the freedom, a certain freedom that you can't gain in any other modality. You can't think yourself into freedom. I mean, people think they could, and maybe they can. But for myself, I've seen it's very limiting to just think about it. To actually put yourself in a fully renunciate type of separation reality. And I think sometimes you do need to separate yourself on a retreat. It could be in daily life. And if I think that's actually more powerful to take it, the spirituality, into everyday life. But like with the praying that the Muslims have just Jews have it too, 3, 4, 5 times a day. I think the liberation aspect of religion really makes it all the problems worth it, because you can't get that. You don't get that type of liberation to me, in some of the things in daily life. I think and I don't want to separate taking your practice of a religion and separate it from social activism, because if you don't have the justice, how can you really live? If in the Buddhists, they have the Bodhisattva vow. Until everybody's freed, you can't be free. And so that's a really good thing to remember. And so I think just the theme of liberation and freedom is really what I like about religion, because some people say, you're crazy. I've talked with people, and they have no belief in God. And they go, that's what you think is going to help society? Is religion or this type of thing? And I go, yeah. And they don't even give me a chance to talk about it because they don't want to. They just think it's completely ridiculous.
Yeah.
But I really do feel that the combination of, walking your talk and doing the best for your people. I mean, when I say your people, the people of the planet and people you come in contact day to day, and caring is a reflection of your belief in God. And that's the thing I like, because you have a chance to liberate by giving to others and also letting them give to you. And that interchange is what's important to me.
Yeah.
And certainly you can use the holidays and the rituals and the daily and the yearly functions to do that. But the key theme is the freedom, liberation. So
Nice.
that's what I think is important. I'm sure if I was to think this thing out, maybe I would say something different on another day, but that's what I have to tell you.
That's substantial as it is. So that's appreciated.
Well, we've gone over 45 minutes.
Yeah. And that's a wrap. Those are the questions. So.
Well, I got a few questions for you, mister. No.
Okay.
No. Okay. Well, listen, thank you for including me, Peter.
Definitely. Thank you for participating.
Maybe we'll talk another day, perhaps as soon as tomorrow. I don't know.
I'm going to stop recording. I'm going to wrap it up here.